Hello, and welcome back to my channel, Penny Prepper. Today's video, we're going to be discussing hobo hacks for preppers. Before we get started today, I'm going to ask that you click the like button and subscribe if you're into emergency preparedness, the outdoors, and just learning some new skills. We're going to start off this video by going over what exactly is considered a hobo. First of all, I'm going to start out by saying, obviously there are better words for people that don't have housing. First of all, I checked it out before doing this video. There is differences between certain terms as far as levels of what you're willing to do if you are homeless and stuff like that. Politically being correct, it would be a person experiencing homelessness. However, there are certain terms that were created to differentiate each individual. So, for instance, a hobo is one of the few that would consider themselves a little bit more productive. Basically, hobo infers that you are without a home and you are basically in seek or willing to work. You know, you're trying to work as you go along. So as you're traveling, you're trying to make money to pay for things, stuff like that. There's also things like the word tramp, which
It's the spaghetti in a town.
is more somebody that's traveling. They try to work as little as possible, and basically, you know, they may be trying to get stuff for free instead of working for it. And then also you have the term bum, which most people probably don't like being called a bum because it is meant to be more derogatory, which is more towards somebody who is without a home and also not willing to work, and typically they do not travel. There is also other words like, I'm sure you've heard the word transient, or somebody who's truant, or there's one vagabond. I'm not sure if I said that right, but that vagabond and truant more have a connotation of, you know, you're a troublemaker or something like that. So if you hear people throwing out those terms, if they know what they're actually saying, you know, you might want to take a listen and, you know, try to figure out what title they're trying to pin on you. I almost forgot one that I also had heard recently. I only heard it when I got into prepping, which is nomad lifestyle, which is, I don't remember the exact definition, but it's something along the lines of you are in search of, I believe the textbook definition is more of in search of better pastures for your livestock. However, I'm guessing in this case, you could consider it just in search of better conditions for yourself. So whether that's going from a awful place that you can't really get a job, stuff like that, like may have happened during the Great Depression, to a place that has a job, something like that. So there's a lot of terms that are thrown out here, and I never realized how much there was until I started researching. After I started looking up the word hobo, I started getting all these extra little leaves, and I was following them, so now you're aware. All right, I use a teleprompter so I don't go off topic. I gotta stop doing that. So, first point, one of my favorite tips that I learned from people who are, you know, either in the city or wherever and don't have a home, one of the greatest things I've learned from them is insulating yourself, because up north in Pennsylvania, it does get very cold, and a lot of times they need ways to warm themselves in the summer. You know, worst case, you can find a creek or some body of water and cool yourself down. But getting cold and being locked out of places is probably one of the worst ways to experience things. I've never been homeless, thank goodness, and I am grateful for that every day. However, I have been in some situations where I have been extremely cold and unable to get to a heat source. So I can definitely appreciate the need for survival in these situations. So the first one is going to be crumpling up newspaper or paper in general. Newspaper is one of the best insulators you can get, and honestly, it's so great for so much. I know you've probably seen people in cartoons where they have a newspaper on top of them, sleeping, using it almost as a blanket. That's because it's a good insulator, and honestly, you can find them just about anywhere. Not as much nowadays, but still. Or even cardboard, using cardboard boxes that people have thrown out. Or in my hometown, we used to have something called the merchandiser, and it was this huge roll of paper. It just had ridiculous amounts of paper in it, and if you have one of those, you could start your fire, probably use it to insulate your jacket, keep yourself warm, and then if your boots got wet or something like that, you crunch it up, put it in there, wake up the next morning, it should have soaked up a lot of the moisture. So that's one of my favorite hacks that I've learned from the homeless. All right, even that was a little bit of a tangent, so I'm going to try to plow through these as quick as I can. Next is going to be that a lot of hobos and the homeless have signs and markings as they actually utilize. I don't remember if I went over this in my urban search and rescue video that I had done a while back, but just like how the military or the fire department, EMS have signs or markings that they use, so do the homeless to mark if a place is safe, if they have food, if they're willing to give you money, if they have bathing opportunities. They have a whole written language, and it's very simplistic. It's circles, squares, triangles, squiggly lines, stick figures, stuff like that. It's really neat. You can find it yourself. I'm not going to go into all that right now because obviously I keep rambling. Next is going to be, as a hobo, basically that is somebody that actually wants to work and tries to work. So there may be opportunities as you're traveling. First of all, try to avoid cities because that's where there's a lot of people, and there may be a lot of people who would take advantage of knowing that you probably don't have a way to protect yourself, whereas somebody who has some more money may. So that might be something where you want to stick to the city. There's a lot more people that are going to be willing to help you. You can avoid a lot of problems. There's more open space that you might be able to camp out or sleep. And typically out in the country is where more people are just willing to help you in general. Even with police departments, they may say, well, we don't want you coming through here. A little bit of Johnny Rambo kind of, the sheriff comes up and says, keep going. Go to the next town. Gives you a ride at least. At least there's that. That'll bring me to my next point. I am very pro law enforcement, but obviously putting yourself in a position where people don't know you, they don't know what you have, you're probably looking dirty, smelly, and you have a lot of stuff on you. And obviously if you do have a run-in with either law enforcement or vigilantes or people who just don't know you and they see you on their property, you may run into a very serious issue. So just trying to avoid, or I guess the best way to put it is complying with law enforcement, or if somebody tells you to get off their property, don't argue, just go. Even if you know that you're on parkland or something like that and it's some random person, don't argue because you're probably not in the type of situation where if you get hurt, you can just go to the hospital and use your insurance. So one of the greatest things that I admire about the homeless or people who are homeless is the fact that they can be so creative and come up with ways to do things. Or it sort of reminds me of people that I see in prison doing some stuff that, like, you see them do it and you're like, wow, that's absolutely amazing. I never would have thought to have done that myself. Such as, I can go over it sometime, but the stinger, which is just a electrical outlet or a extension cord that you cut the tip off of, use some nail clippers, put it in water, and it makes the water boil. Same with the homeless. I'm sure you've probably heard of the penny stove. That is something that came from people who were on the road and all that they really had around was maybe some alcohol or some flammable material, and they had maybe their pocket knife, and they found a tin can. Well, those three things, you can make a small little stove, and you can hook up you can heat up a can of beans, and then take that can, clean it out, and you got another stove. Now, the ingenuity of people that are put in survival situations, again, astounding, amazing. I hope I never have to experience that, but it's the same as if you're out on the trail and all of a sudden you're like, what do I want to do to keep such and such at a certain level? Well, you might create something out on the trail. And sometimes when you're left to nothing but your own mind, you can come up with that kind of stuff. So I highly suggest, if you have the opportunity when you're hiking, just sort of start making stuff, and you'll be surprised at what you can create. Public transportation is another one. You're better off sticking with public transportation if you can, because I'm sure we've all heard the story about hitchhikers who go out and end up never being seen again. Well, it's the same example, it's cheap, and a lot of times you can probably stay on a nice warm bus for a couple rounds. The bus drivers probably won't give you too much guff unless you stink real bad or something. And it's a way to get up off your feet and go a couple miles. It might only take a couple cents, actually probably a couple dollars nowadays, but just for an example. And while you're doing that, maybe people will notice and be able to also help you or offer assistance. All right, this one's going to be a little bit more on the, gross side, but scavenging or trying to get free resources for food. You may have to really drop your bar pretty low as far as what type of meals you're going to be having. Like me personally, I'm not a big fan of fish, but I'll tell you what, when I was hiking the backcountry in New Mexico at Philmont Scout Ranch, we had Boy Scout versions of MREs, and I got a can of tuna the one day, and I scarfed it down like I didn't even really notice till I looked at the can and it said tuna. I was like, oh, okay, well, I ate it. I'm not going to puke it back up because I can't spare the calories. But, it's one of those things. When I worked in the prison, the food in there, not high quality by any standards. There's certain levels, and prisons are pretty much down near the bottom to the point where sometimes some of the boxes will have stamped on them for institutional use only, so not for normal human consumption. All right, I know I made a little bit of a comparison earlier with the homeless to prisoners. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying it more, I want to reiterate, I have the utmost respect for anybody who is without housing and is attempting to survive and make their life better. But that's one of the things is you see that there is a hierarchy, a structure to a lot of homeless encampments or, even in missions, there may be some people that sort of have a little bit of a strong arm in there. Granted, a lot of times they're not supposed to, but hey, neither is prison. So there's some times where you really want to, if you do experience something like this, you really need to adapt and overcome. One of the things I could use an example of is I've seen people that say that they live out of their cars. That's a great example because what they do is they just live in their car. If somebody chalks their tire to make sure that they have to move after so long, they might move it around the block, wait for it to get chalked again, and just keep repeating. Also, as far as showering, you can get a $10 Planet Fitness membership and shower in pretty much any of the Planet Fitness gyms in the country. I'm not sure how far out west they go, but just an example. Also, you can take what's called a bird bath. That's a little bit of something from prison where you take a washcloth and you just sort of give yourself a little rinse. There are a lot of resources out there as far as food, shelter, healthcare, communication. Really, one of the biggest things to take out of this is if you are going through a rough patch or you could see it possibly happening in the future, even if you don't expect it, it's one of those things where it's a good idea to at least prepare. Know where the homeless shelters are in your area. Know the churches nearby. Maybe you could actually go out and provide help for people and get yourself on the other side of it before anything happens. I know me and the wife, we have talked plenty about going and helping at churches or soup kitchens just to give back to the community. And then in that case, if there were to ever be a scenario, I would know, well, I can go here or I can use this resource just on the fact that I have used them for other people. All right, so we're almost at the end of the video, so thank you if you stuck around so far. One of the things I want to cover last here is there are plenty of resources. Another thing that you need to make sure that you're always aware of besides people is going to be the weather, because the weather really can sneak up on you and have a turn for the worse. So up here in Pennsylvania, it gets really cold. Down south, you probably got to worry more about mosquitoes, the heat, stuff like that. Out west, you might have to worry more about the dry air or dust bowls, stuff like that, or tornadoes, or extreme weather as flooding. So really, the best thing to do is, if you are out dealing with something like this, to try to get an interaction with other people who are experienced with this. A lot of times they will probably be more than happy to help you. That's the one thing I could definitely say that's probably different than in prison, is people will probably help you and not have an expectation of, oh, well, I gave you this information, so now you're going to have to make me a chi-chi. So I think that would be probably one of the biggest differences. I have a teleprompter on here for a reason, and it's to remind me of things. Glad I did. So a big thing that you also might want to try to get ahead of, even with camping, hiking, whatever, having socks. Socks is one of the biggest requested items of people without homes. They always ask for socks or new clothes, or even just clothes that fit and will do the job. So obviously not a guy my size asking for a small t-shirt, but socks are a huge thing, especially ones that actually come up past the ankle, just because you never know what kind of shoes they're going to be wearing. All right, so my call to action for this video, I guess, would be more or less research your local soup kitchens, shelters, missions. And for this one, I'm going to actually say that you should try to maybe volunteer at one of them, or reach out and see if you can donate some used clothes or something like that, just to give back. Maybe you have some food that's about to expire in your rotation. Just go out, give some. That's what I do with my stuff if it's about to expire and I don't really have the stomach to eat it at that time, something like that. So that should be something that should be easy for anyone to do, and it's kind and generous. All right, that's all we have for today's video. If there's anything you would like to see me cover in the upcoming videos, please comment and let me know. Stay safe and stay prepared.